ahead, Brian. Lead us off, I guess you're up on the podium. So.
Yep, we're going to jump in. It's the Brian Scott Show.
Okay.
All right, first item on tonight's agenda is a public hearing concerning the amendment to the 2017 budget. The adopted annual budget establishes the maximum expenditure authority for each fund or taxing authority for the particular fiscal year. Exceeding these expenditures without formally amending the budget is actually a violation of Kansas budget state statutes. So we do have a couple of funds tonight that have kind of reached their limit. And so we have an amendment before you for your consideration. The first is actually Equipment Reserve and Replacement Fund. There's an item later on the agenda tonight concerning the establishment of the Equipment Replacement and Reserve Fund. This is a financing mechanism by which the city can set aside funds each year from its budget as kind of a savings account, if you will, to build up a savings for the future purchase of equipment. It's primarily the more expensive pieces of equipment like vehicles, trucks, large capital outlays for technology, etc. We had identified $200 in 2017 budget, actually $250,000 in the 2017 budget as a transfer to the Equipment Reserve Replacement Fund. We reduced that to $200,000 in order to apply that $50,000 now offset the increase in our health insurance. But we would like to go ahead and transfer that $200,000 to the Equipment Replacement Fund from the general fund. And we will need to establish the Equipment Replacement Reserve Fund in order to do that. And that'll be later in the budget, or later in the agenda tonight. The next item is the Capital Improvement Fund. We are asking for an increase in expenditure authority from $1,027,000 to $1,964,000. This is primarily to reflect a grant that we received from the County Assistance Road System for cars, is what we typically call it, for the Fox Ridge project. We had budgeted the match for the Fox Ridge project in the 2017 budget, but we had not budgeted the potential grant that we received from that as an offset until after the budget was adopted. And so we learned about that, the award of that grant in the fall after the budget was adopted. So this is now just going to catch up to reflect that receiving of that grant and the full expenditure for that project. And then finally, the Mission Crossing TIF Fund. We've been making budget amendments each year to the two TIF funds that we have in place to reflect realized expenditures. We didn't have to do that this year with the Cornerstone Commons TIF because we were within budget on that. But with the Mission Crossing TIF, with the Wellstone building, that project is now fully complete. And the Wellstone building came onto the tax rolls this year. So we received the full value of the property increment from the Wellstone project. So we need to reflect that in an amendment to the budget. And that would be transferred to the developer as part of the development agreement that was adopted for that project. So that is the amendment to the 2017 budget. If there's any questions, I can answer those now.
Actually, I think we need to formally open the public hearing on the budget.
Yeah, sorry guys, got stuck
That's
at the
okay.
office a little late. Let's call our Finance and Admin public hearing meeting open. It's 6:34 now. So Brian, you've already given an update on the public hearing on the budget amendment for 2017.
Everything I just said.
Yep.
Does anybody have any questions on that?
Repeat for me one more time the differential between the full money versus minus the grant money, would you please?
Oh, for the Capital Improvement Fund, yeah, the total expenditure was $1,027,000 that was budgeted, and it's $1,964,000 would be the new total expenditure for that fund. And that reflects the grant. It also reflects a transfer that we had to make from the water utility fund to this fund to pay debt service.
And what was that value?
That was about $255,000. The grant was $650,000.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments or anything from the public? If not, I think we can So I think we can call our public hearing closed. I don't know, Laura, is there any other
Nope.
procedural thing we need to do with that? Okay.
You'll take action on that later.
Cool. Well, then we can go ahead and open our Finance and Admin Committee meeting for December 13th. First up on the agenda is a pre-audit presentation. So, Brian, can we go ahead with that?
So a month or two ago, I was before you all with a contract for a new audit firm, which was approved. We are beginning the audit process now. The auditors will be here next week doing their initial field work, and then they'll be back here in February to do the actual audit. We wanted to kick things off tonight by having them present to you all kind of a preliminary letter of engagement, if you will, sort of. This is in compliance with the SAS 114. SAS is the Statement of Auditing Standards that's issued by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. So it's an opportunity for them to kind of communicate with you all about the expectations of the audit, the type of work that they'll be doing, answering questions that you may have, and just have a general conversation. So with that, I'd like to introduce Stacy Hammond and Emily Sheldon from the firm of Burbridge, Tehran and Company. And they will come on up. I think they've got a letter they want to hand out to you all, and a brief presentation, and they'll take any questions that you have. You can either stand here at the podium, or you can have a seat at the table if you like, whatever you feel more comfortable with. Okay.
Okay, well, it's a pleasure for Emily and I to be here tonight to talk to you a little bit about the audit process. I'm Stacy Hammond, and I'm going to be the partner on the City of Mission's financial statement audit. And with me tonight is Emily Sheldon, who will be the manager on the audit. Emily is distributing to all of you right now a letter, and Brian called it the SAS 114 audit planning letter. That's kind of auditor language talking about SASs. But our auditing standards require that we communicate to you certain information about our audit process in the form of a planning letter, and that's what you have in front of you right now. I'm going to go through the points in the letter and then just open it up to any questions that you might have about our audit process. If you look at the letter, the first section about communications, it really discusses communications between our firm and the City Council. As part of our audit planning process, we will be scheduling a meeting with the mayor, either in person or by telephone, whatever the city's preference is, to discuss the City Council's oversight of the effectiveness of the city's internal control, any areas or concerns that we need to be aware of from the City Council's perspective in planning the audit, or any concerns that the City Council might have about fraud.
Yeah. When is that happening?
We generally schedule that meeting after the beginning of the year. Really, it's whenever the city wants it to happen, but it's generally a couple months out from our field work. So I was anticipating that we would do in January, but we could still try to get that in before year end if the city would prefer that.
Well, I would prefer it be done prior to January 8th.
Okay, okay. We can get that set up. All right, I'll visit with Ryan about it here tomorrow and see if we can't get that set up. Okay? We also want the City Council to know that we will immediately communicate to the City Council throughout the audit process any issues that arise in any of the following areas. And that would be, one, any fraud that might involve senior management or other fraud that causes a material misstatement of the financial statements, any instances of non-compliance with laws or regulations that come to our attention, any disagreements that we might be having with management about the audit, or any serious difficulties that we're encountering in performing the audit. Hopefully none of those things will happen and you won't hear about any of those, but if they do, that's not something that we wait until the end of the audit to bring to your attention. That's something that happens immediately when it comes to our attention during the audit. At the conclusion of our audit, we will issue a letter to the City Council that communicates certain matters that are significant and relevant to you in your oversight of the financial reporting process. What you have in front of you tonight is what we call the SAS 114 planning letter. At the conclusion of the audit, I'll be presenting to the City Council what we call the SAS 114 final letter, that discusses the results of our audit of the city's financial statements. The second section of this letter tonight discusses our independence policies and procedures that are in place to ensure that we remain independent in the audit services we're providing to the city. I'm not really going to elaborate on that, but it's there for your reading information. The third section of the letter talks about our audit planning process. The first step in our planning process is to obtain an understanding of the city's internal control. We use this understanding in order to identify certain risks in the city's operations, and we also use that information to tailor our audit approach. This step of the audit approach is currently underway. Emily and I have already met with Brian and Debbie, and Emily, Brian, and Debbie have been busy documenting all the city's internal controls as that part of our planning process. We've also scheduled interim field work for next Wednesday and Thursday in order to complete this planning step. The fourth section of our letter talks about how we apply the concept of materiality in conducting our audit, and how we use materiality in deciding whether or not to record an adjusting journal entry when we might find an uncorrected misstatement as part of the audit process. At the conclusion of our audit, we will provide to the City Council any adjustments that we might have made, any adjustments that we had to make to the city's financial statements, or if there were adjustments that were not so material that we needed to make them, but significant enough that you should know about, we'll also give you a list of those, and we call that the list of uncorrected misstatements. The fifth section of the letter explains that our audit of the city includes obtaining an understanding of internal control, but our audit is not designed to provide assurance on internal control, and we're not providing an opinion on the city's internal control. The opinion that we will be providing to the city is whether or not the financial statements are free of material misstatement. The final sections of the letter talk about dates and timelines in our audit process. I have already mentioned that Emily will be here next Wednesday and Thursday to conduct interim field work, and I believe we have scheduled the final audit field work for the city for the week of February 18th, 2018. That kind of concludes, all the things that we're required to tell you up front, as part of our SAS 114 planning letter. And at this point, I'd just like to open it up to any questions that anyone might have.
How many auditor hours are you guys planning on spending?
We budgeted this when we bid on the city's audit. And I can't remember the exact number that it was, but if I had to guess, it's somewhere between 200 and 400 in that range, and I honestly can't remember exactly what it is. But if I got your contact information, I'd be certainly happy to email that to you so that you'd have the number. Okay, yes, I will do that. Any other questions?
Thanks.
Okay, thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about the planning and the audit tonight.
All right. Well, next up on our action items for tonight, we have an item about the 2018 Human Service Fund recommendations. So, Scott, fill us in on that one.
The Human Services Fund is administered by the United Community Services of Johnson County. The Human Services Fund awards competitive grants to nonprofit agencies to assist with the operation of human service safety net programs that meet the needs of Johnson County residents who live with income at or near the federal poverty level. Components of the safety net programs that are supported by the Human Services include basic needs, work and income supports, health and wellness, and personal safety. Last year, every year the city allocates a certain portion of its funds to the Human Services Fund. Last year this was $7,000. This was combined with allocations from 15 other participating cities in Johnson County as well as the county itself for a total of $310,965 that was given out in 14 separate grants to different agencies. This year, the UCS board is recommending a total allocation of $335,930. It's an increase of 8%, or $24,965. The city's contribution this year will be $7,600. This amount has been budgeted in the 2018 budget. And there's kind of a summary in your packet. There's a number of programs that are supported by these funds. Catholic Charities of Northeast Kansas, Harvesters, Jewish Family Services, Safe Homes, Sunflower House, Family Conservancy, there's a few. And there's information about each of the programs and the allocations that are being given to those programs. We also have with us Maria Schott from UCS. She's here tonight if you have any questions.
No, unless, Maria, do you have anything specific you wanted to tell us?
Yeah.
I want to say thank you, first and foremost. The City of Mission has contributed to the Human Service Fund since the city started joining with the county, which goes back to 1990. And your dollars really have made a difference in the lives of people, not only in Mission, but throughout the county. This is a pooled fund, as was explained to you, with the county and the cities together. So it really has a big impact countywide. I basically want to answer questions. I know you have a full agenda. But I'd be happy to answer any questions, or I can kind of tell you a little bit more about the process or the programs that are funded, whatever your pleasure is. Yes?
Do you do a quarterly newsletter or anything where you could basically do some pictures of what the monies go for?
We do a lot through our website now. We used to print a newsletter that went out to jurisdictions as well as others in the community. The last time we really highlighted the Human Service Fund was about maybe 10 years ago, and I'd be happy to send you that because it's a printed publication, and it does include some of the stories of the organizations that were that continue to be funded at this point. But
What is your
it's
website?
a little more
Have that information on it? Some of the...
that was, like I said, probably 10 years ago. So I'm not sure if that particular newsletter is still on our website, but I could let you know and send that to Brian.
But overall, is the information more
About
frequently developed or changed out regarding your services and programs on your website?
Yes.
I think
Yes.
That was my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, it is. And we do include the recommendations report on the website as well as the year-end report. Grantees are asked to submit both two reports, one at the end of the first 6 months and then one at the year. They report on their outcomes, how many people were served, kind of what the services that were provided, those kinds of things. Thank you.
Can you give us just a real, like a Cliff Notes version of the process? Because I think we go through this every year, and I know I was in the process in 1990 when we did this.
Okay.
And I think it makes a difference. I think it's difficult to understand how you do this. So I think it would be nice for you to give us just a short process.
Sure. Well, let's see, where shall I start? We start in terms of soliciting grants. We issue a request for proposal and an application to not only organizations that are currently funded, but others that have come to our attention have said they'd like to receive the information. We posted on our website that it is available. Applicants submit the application by first part of the summer. Applications are reviewed by a committee. The committee is made up, it's listed in the report of the members of this year's committee for 18, but they're community members as well as members of the UCS board. They read each proposal and score them on a matrix, for outcomes, financial stability. There's about 10 points or so 10 areas that they look at and score those. Then the committee comes back together and discusses the proposals and what they see as the strengths and weaknesses based upon the criteria that were set forth, and come up with their recommendations for funding. The recommendations for funding are then put into the report like you have before you and sent to all the jurisdictions for their acceptance.
And the committee is made up of how many people?
I think it was about 6 or 7 this year. It varies. Let's see, did I get that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 people this year. The request to the jurisdiction goes out in the spring saying, please consider including this in your budget, and then we come back after the recommendations have been made to and accepted by the UCS board. I left out a step. to go to the cities for their acceptance of the recommendations. And then we notify the agencies, and they have to sign an agreement saying that they'll provide the reports, they'll do what they said they were going to do in their grant application, and that's signed by each of the grantees. Sure.
How many cities have ever denied the request?
I went back as far, we've lost 4 cities in the past several years. Fairways, their last donation was in 2010, Lake Lanier was 07, Mission Woods was 2010, and Westwood Hills was 2017. Now, some of those go back all the way to 1990, others don't. But those are the 4 that stand out that aren't currently involved, but we still come back to them and try to encourage them to take part in this, to support the fund. It does help folks in those communities, so
Yeah.
we do what we can. Yeah.
So I think, does anyone else have any other questions, or?
I think it's excellent use of the money, and I think it goes to help some great causes, and I think we should do it.
Yeah, so the budget is 7,600, and the budget for 2018, we're going to put it council.
Yes, sir.
Consent.
Consent?
Consent
No,
agenda?
no, I don't think it'll be.
No?
I think it'll be.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your recommendation.
Yeah. We're going to take it
It's
to
not
council.
on the consent agenda.
But I don't
So
think it should be on the consent agenda.
Okay,
because
so
I
that
think
would be
we want
tonight's-
audience to know
that
that
will
we
be
can
next
contribute.
Sure.
Next week?
That's a fair
Next
point.
month, I guess.
Okay,
Very good.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Next action item we have tonight is the 2018 alcohol tax fund recommendations. So Brian, could you please update us on that?
Same group, a little different verse. By state statutes, the state of Kansas imposes a 10% liquor drink tax, affectionately called the alcohol tax, on the sale of any drink containing alcoholic liquor sold by clubs, caterers, or drinking establishments. Now, revenues derived from this tax is allocated 30% to the state, 70% to the jurisdiction which that particular establishment is located. The state further stipulates that for cities of mission size, the portion that 70% be allocated in thirds, 1/3 going to the general fund, 1/3 going to the special parks and recreation fund, and 1/3 to the special alcohol tax fund. And the special alcohol tax fund is to support programs whose principal purpose is alcoholism and drug abuse prevention or treatment of persons who are alcoholics or drug abusers or are in danger of becoming alcoholics or drug abusers. And that's quoted directly from the state statute. Our total alcohol tax fund, our distribution for 2018 is estimated to be $195,000. So split that 3 ways, 65,000 would go to the general fund, 65,000 would go to special parks, and 65 would go to the special alcohol tax fund. And of that 65, we kind of divvy that up. A portion of that goes to support our mental responders program. A portion of that goes to support our DARE program. And then about 30,000 goes to support actual programs that were mentioned in the state statute. And these programs are coordinated by the Drug and Alcoholism Council, which is supported by the United Community Services of Johnson County. So what we have before us tonight on this agenda is the allocation of $30,000 that would be basically divvied up amongst the programs that, again, much like the Human Services Fund, have submitted a request for grants through the United Community Services for support of their programs. And I think just about every city in Johnson County and the county participated in this, just like the Human Services Fund. So Gardner, Leawood, Lenexa, Merriam, Lathrop, Little Park, Berry Village, Shawnee, and us in the county. So that total allocation from all of those communities would be $2 million that go to support various programs in Johnson County to support Johnson County residents. So Again, the 30,000 has been budgeted in the 2018 budget, so
Brian, where's the other 35,000?
that's going to be your,
Mental health
yeah,
co-responders.
mental health co-responders
DARE.
and your DARE, yeah.
Okay. So isn't it about, I think it was 14,000 on the mental health correspondent program?
Yeah.
Have we had any updates on how the first year of that program's going? Because I think last year was the first year we participated, right?
Yeah, and I'm probably best to point that question towards the chief. He can answer that better than I.
So this program started over the summer. And anytime you get a new program, Olathe and Overland Park have their own co-responders. This is the largest co-responder program because there's 7 cities that are sharing one person. So in the last 6 weeks, we've had 8 calls where that co-responder was on duty. We've had other calls, 3 o'clock in the morning, it could be 9 in the morning, where we forward those reports on. The other thing is if I show up to somebody's house, even if the co-responder is working and they want to go to the hospital, it saves us time. If they're willing to go and sign themselves in and get that kind of help, then we take them straight to the hospital. So the co-responder follows up with them later, but just in the last 6 weeks, we've had 8 times where we've reached out to that co-responder. Sometimes they're available, sometimes they're not. But it's between $10,000 and $14,000 roughly is what it costs. They're housed out of the Leawood police station. They have a car, they have a phone, they have a laptop, they have access to our station. But for that amount of money, and in 6 weeks, the last 6 weeks, we've already used it 8 times. Tells you that it's a good use of the money, in my opinion. They also do some training for our officers. And again, this program, like I said at the dinner last week, is not perfect. Anytime that you're starting a brand new program and 7 different people are sharing one person, you got to work those kinks out, and we're doing that. But 8 times in 6 weeks, just in the hours that person's working, is a lot.
Yeah.
And that doesn't include the calls that we get to mental health, which is also here in Michigan. So.
Thanks.
Yep.
I neglected, Mario obviously can answer questions from United Community Services, excuse me. And then Leanna Riesinger, is that correct? Riesinger is our mission representative on the Drug and Alcohol Awareness Council.
Ryan, I have a question for you, or maybe for you. KBC, Behavioral Health Care, this is new this year.
Yes, that's right.
Can you tell me the difference of what they were doing before you're funding it, or why are you funding it, or with all the KBC
Well,
problems?
this is the second time that, in my work with the Alcohol and Drug Council, which has been about 7 years now, this is the second time they applied, and it is for the same program they applied for previously, last year. The difference between 18 and 17 is now they are doing this more as a pilot program, and what they're proposing to do is to work with the parents of children who have been removed from their homes. So they're in state custody, they're in foster care, and many of those children have been removed from their homes because of parent substance abuse. And so the idea is that go back and try to work with the families, help the parents to accept responsibility for their substance use and seek treatment. They will go in, the KVC caseworker is going to go into the home. They are going to do a short evaluation there and then refer for treatment or whatever,
What was they doing beforehand, before this?
KVC, in terms of working with parents.
They got money from other sources, I'm assuming.
I was told, my understanding is this was a pilot project. Leanna, do you remember
That's
that at all?
correct.
Yeah. This was a pilot program, so if they were doing it before, that's not to my knowledge. And to my knowledge, they're not doing it in Johnson County. They could be doing it in other parts of the state. I don't know.
What does that stand for, KBC?
Used to be Call Valley Center, but they changed and now they go by KBC. It's a behavioral health organization, very large behavioral health organization. Yeah. So we thought we'd we agreed, the recommendation from the Drug and Alcoholism Council that has also been approved by the UCS board was to fund part of their request. I would say that the main difference between these two funds, well, there's several, but of course the money is considerably larger for the alcohol tax fund. It is, as explained to you, it was by statute that it has to be used for substance abuse, education, prevention, intervention, programming. The process is more rigorous. You ask about the grant review and the process for that. It's a great question. The committee that reviews the grants, the Drug and Alcoholism Council, is made up of representatives from all the jurisdictions that contribute, as well as people from the at-large community. And it's, again, thank you for your participation and contribution to this fund. Last year, in 2016, about 71,000 people in Johnson County were served by the programs that were funded through the alcohol tax. And we are really pleased that the total's gone up so much, in large part to increases from several of the cities, and especially the city of Overland Park. So, anything you would add, Leah?
I think perhaps in your package it is distinguished between prevention and treatment programs, and so obviously a lot of the dollars are allocated towards prevention programs, which many of the organizations that we have agreed to fund are using best practices. So it's alcohol EDU, for example, beginning with middle school and into high school programs. So obviously we know by spending more money up front on prevention programs, you end up having less of a problem down the road. So I think it's important to mention that a lot of those dollars are being allocated to preventing someone from ever beginning.
And Leanna is a Mission resident. She's our rep on the Drug and Alcohol Council. She lives in the countryside.
Just had to point out that she's from Ward 4, right?
Yes. Really? Okay, I will.
Anyone else have any questions? Any recommendations on how to move forward with the alcohol tax fund? Take it to council?
But no.
At some point down the line, as we expend monies through a budget process, there are several of us on here who really like measurements. So if you could say, like you distinguish by saying how many thousands of people have been affected or impacted by these funds, those are real important numbers to us because it shows us, that the money's actually working on families and things that we're seeing tangible results from. So if your website on your side of the thing has anything on the measurement of, we put X amount of money in, we saw these results and these measurements, that's real important because we don't really see, all we see is it's gone up, we're putting forth the money with good hearts and good souls, but it's helpful to see, okay, you're seeing 3 times as many people as you did last year. Well, and out of those 3 times as many, we went through prevention process, so we saw results, and the people, 10 people over here who were already in the program, now there's 20 people here who won't go that far because we got them at the prevention level. Those measurements, I think, are really helpful for us to see.
Well, every year we print a year-end program. Year-end report, and it will tell you how many clients were served by each of those organizations and what their outcomes were. So we really leave it up to the grantees to say what their outcomes are and how they're going to measure it. A lot of times in education, what you see is an increase in knowledge, for example, as opposed to a treatment program where you see how many people actually completed the treatment, were successful in completing their treatment. But that's certainly available in the year-end reports, and I submit that to the city administrator and the mayor.
One quick question,
Yes.
maybe kind of off the cuff. If you have a family that has an adult alcohol problem and you're trying to work, is there a limit of how many times you can go back to that family?
Well, it would depend upon the organization. I mean, United Community Services doesn't provide any direct alcohol substance abuse services. So, for example, in that case, that person might be working with some counselors at a first call so that even the family's getting some support. Or maybe they're involved in a treatment with Preferred Family Health Care that provides alcohol treatment. And it's up then to, for example, Preferred Family Health Care to say how many times a person could come back. I mean, honestly, relapse is common. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times for somebody to go through treatment before they're successful.
I might also add that for Shawnee Mission School District specifically, the alcohol EDU program I mentioned a moment ago, 1,566 students will be served by that portion of funds specifically directed to Shawnee Mission.
Thank you. That's good.
So I don't know if you have access to this, but for each of the programs that are being recommended for the funding, most of them in that synopsis do mention the number of people that will be impacted by those funds. Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, again, thank you very much, and it sounds like I'll see you next week.
Yep.
Thanks.
All right, so it sounds like the recommendation is to go to council, allow the consent agenda. Great. We will go ahead and move on with the next item. We've got Brian Scott again to update us on 2018 property casualty and general liability.
I brought my coffee, so.
You have a busy night, Brian.
I do, yes. Okay, moving right along. This item is the renewal of property and liability insurance of One Beacon in the amount not to exceed $128,329. This particular line of insurance covers all of our property, automobile, inland marine, crime, and general liability. We've been with One Beacon since 2014. Last year, we utilized the services of our insurance broker, CBiz, to actually go out to bid, and One Beacon presented us the best offer, so we renewed with them. We decided again this year to kind of go back to them directly and negotiate for renewal, which we felt we were pretty competitive in doing that. So we're recommending to you the property and liability insurance for a total amount not to exceed $128,329. Something that is a little bit different that I wanted to mention. We are also recommending in that amount cyber liability insurance. And it's something that we've discussed a couple of years now with Lockton. Kind of given some of the incidents that have happened this past year with malware and ransomware. There's been some national incidents with bugs that are being sent out to the network across the internet, locking up major systems for companies. In addition, there's been some incidents where information has been absconded from a company's network, and then primarily confidential information like credit card information, social security, date of birth. That's created quite a bit of concern for everybody. Target's probably the best example of that. That happened about a year ago, where they had credit card information on almost all of their customers. So with that, we thought that the property and liability insurance would be a good coverage to have for us. We haven't had any particular direct incidents with malware or ransomware. We have been phished a couple times. Our accountant got an email from me one day about 9 months ago saying that we needed to transfer money, wire money, to an account, and she knew that wasn't our practice. I was actually out of the office, so she called me up my cell phone and said, "Did you just send me this email?" I said, "No, I did not." So we obviously did not fall into that trap. So I mean, we're very observant of those kind of things. But part of that's our internal controls and our policies we have in place. But nevertheless, just to have that additional coverage, and my concern primarily is, especially now when we're doing open enrollment, we're sharing employee information, social security numbers, date of birth with healthcare providers, dental provider, or vision insurance provider. as well as pension plan capers. And we're doing a lot of that across the internet. We try to do that in a very secure fashion. We utilize secure email or portals for those type of things. Those entities have insurance in case that information gets released, but sometimes that's not enough, and that can be pointed back to us. My understanding of the law is that we could ultimately be responsible because we shared that information with them. So this coverage would help to kind of cover that. And our brokers from CBIZ are here tonight, Tom McGuire and Eric Haig. They can talk to you, answer any questions you have about any of these coverages that we have. Do you have anything you'd like to add, or did I cover it all?
Come over to work for us after you. So if we get this new slipper slide that you're proposing, Christie, is this going to cover that? Because I don't know how dangerous those are.
Yes.
So it covers everything at this point.
We've been negotiating with the contractor on indemnification and insurance coverage.
Okay.
So that'll actually be, it's going to be an addendum to the contract. We got it back earlier this week from the attorneys. It's all finalized now, and that'll be a part of your contract next week when you consider that formal session with the full council. But yes, those are the type of things that we look for when we're negotiating those contracts, and we work with our attorneys to make sure that we have the proper coverage. We also work with CBIZ to make sure we have the proper coverage, the proper indemnification, but then it's also covered in our liability insurance as well. So it's kind of a double coverage, if you will. We try to pass the liability off as much as we can to other folks. So
Sure.
Anybody have any other questions or recommendations? Probably on consent for that
I
one?
think so.
Let's take on consent. All right. Next up, we have an update on the Kansas Eastern Regional Insurance Trust for KERIT Workers' Comp Renewal. So we've got Brian Scott to give us an update.
Okay.
Go ahead, Brian.
This is my favorite time of the year. Love the holidays. So the city by law is required to provide workers' compensation coverage to its employees. We do that through participation in the Kansas Eastern Regional Insurance Trust. We've been a member of that trust since 2009. It's 18 communities throughout eastern Kansas that make up the trust membership. They've done an excellent job of controlling cost and providing quality coverage for workers' compensation to all of its members. This year's premiums, or actually 2018's premiums, will be $89,803. It's a 6% increase over the current year. Those premiums are made up of wages, experience modifier. The experience modifier is kind of a running 3-year average on our claims. And that's it. That's kind of workers' compensation in a nutshell. Once we adopt this, we will have an audit of our payroll in January. We typically get reimbursement back in that audit because invariably our wages are below the budget of wages that we gave them last year when we established those premiums. So we'll get a little bit back, and we usually apply that to the second invoice to reduce those costs.
What kind of a safety program do we have to try to manage these dollars?
KERIT has a safety program called KERIT Plus. They come out and do a site audit every year. They provide some training programs for us. We do need to get an internal safety program back up and running for the city. That's one of my goals for this year. We had a safety committee for a while. That's kind of languished, so we need to reinvent that, if you will. Combine that, and then revisit our safety manual and update that. Start providing some more rigorous safety programs. We had a couple injuries this past year. Nothing terribly severe. We had a shoulder incident, and then we had somebody that cut their hand the other day in a sign, and those are just kind of silly things that could have been easily prevented. So I think if we reinstitute that safety methodology, with our own organization and really kind of drill down with our employees, we can prevent some of those things.
I think it's important from a dollar standpoint and from a personnel standpoint to
Yeah.
keep our people safe.
Any recommendations or other questions? Okay, Bill. Council? Consent? Next agenda item that we have are changes to the city's personnel policy and guidelines. So, Brian, if you could.
Okay, we do have a formal personnel policy. This is on our city webpage, and we distribute it each year to our employees and ask them to sign a waiver or acknowledgement, excuse me, that they've received this and reviewed it. Every year, we take an opportunity to kind of go through and update it to make sure that it's compliant with the most recent state and federal statutes and in general any employment practices. We do this internally as well as sharing a document with an HR consultant. So we did that this year. And really the only noticeable improvement is an addition, section J8 on page 41. Section J outlines harassment in the workplace. And it speaks mostly to sexual harassment, harassment based on race, gender, one's ethnic background or religion. Our HR consultant thought that it might be good to have kind of a catch-all, if you will. And so she added a section at the end called Other Inappropriate Behavior. And these are really a behavior that an employee would demonstrate that may not necessarily be tied to one of those that is listed. It might be bullying would be a good example of that. So she has had this put into other personnel policies of other clients of hers, and she's found it to be very beneficial. So she's suggesting we have that. That's it.
Any other questions?
Take it to council.
Council, consent?
Consent.
Yep.
Sounds good. Next up, we have our 2018 IT support services contract overview. So, Ryan, if you could please update us.
Okay.
Almost done, you only got a couple more.
Only a few more, yeah. We have an annual agreement with the Johnson County Department of Technology and Innovation for general IT support. This is primarily support of our network and then this general help desk support, answering questions by phone or by email about computer applications, my printer's down or can't get the internet, that kind of thing. We've had this arrangement since 2011. We added the police department in 2014. It's proven to become an economical way to offer IT support to our organization, utilizing the resources of the county. There's been several other cities that have joined since our initial endeavor into this relationship, including Mission Hills, Fairway, and Roland Park. They are proposing a renewal of the agreement again for 2018 with a total cost of $52,907. $21,000 would be for the city, the $31,800 would be for the police department. The police department is the biggest department in the city, and their needs are a little bit more particular than the rest of us. That's why we broke it out that way. In addition, they have also offered to us kind of a supplementary agreement, if you will, for $6,467, and that would be to actually do some on-site support of our computers, go around, visit each of our computers, make sure they're clean, do an inventory of those, and then just answer kind of questions that people may have, in particular about an application on their computer or some peculiarity of their computer. They always wonder, my computer's too slow, or I have a hard time getting this particular application, to be able to address those questions. And they're proposing to do that 2 times a year, actually be on site to do that. And that'd be $6,467.
Who's our contact now at the police department? You know, that Dave's not.
Kevin Self.
Kevin Self?
And we've had this for several years now. How do you guys feel, the police department and you, about the cost effectiveness of this arrangement?
Yeah, I think, generally it's been a good relationship. I will say this, their costs are starting to go up. And so, they're kind of feeling the pressure like everybody else to cost recover. And so the county commission had actually asked them to go back and look at their services and make sure they're doing full cost recovery. Not only the contracts they have with the outside agencies like us, but with internal services, the other departments they serve. So they hired a consultant this past year to come in and do that study. Just identify all of their costs and where that money's going and how to recover that. And so subsequently, they have kind of laid out over the next 4 to 5 years subsequent increases in the contract for us. And so
these new courthouses don't pay for themselves.
They don't pay for themselves, no. And we've been kind of kicking around amongst ourselves. It probably wouldn't hurt to go out and market that service to somebody else to see if there's somebody can offer the comparable type of service for the same price or less.
I do remember last year with some equipment bids that we got that
Right.
were pretty substantially high.
Yeah.
I don't know about the ongoing service and so on.
So we kind of made a commitment to ourselves, put together an RFP, shop that around. We'll have the county respond to the RFP as well as some other agencies we've talked with. Firms.
This extra is $6,400 for the biannual review of people's computers. Have we done something similar in the past?
No.
No.
Yeah, just kind of on an SD
Does the
basis.
police department even want them doing that?
Yeah, well, that was actually something that we had a leadership team meeting to talk about, kind of IT needs, frustrations, brainstorming, where could we use some help, and that was one of the things that very quickly rose to the top, was feeling like twice a year could somebody come around and just actually sit with me or have a conversation with me, make sure my machine is cleaned out, looks good. But a lot of people, what we heard was people are having issues that they've found workarounds for, or they don't have time to call the help desk, and so it just kind of builds up. And so that was an indirect response to kind of what we heard from the leadership team in that meeting, and I think will be good. And I think, we have the ability this is an annual contract, but we have the ability with 90 days notice to change directions. So if we find something, their costs are increasing. I can tell you that prior to moving to DTI back in 2011, we were spending about $150,000 to $160,000 a year.
That's good.
For very similar services. So we've still got some ground to make up there, and that's one of the things that. So have we had some frustrations along the way? Yes, and we've been, I think, very candid with DTI. Some of the things that we may be asking them to do are not, they don't have a lot of expertise in that, and we've asked them to be, more direct with us.
Yeah.
That if they can't handle it, don't tell us you can and then take it and, hold the project for months at a time. Tell us you need to go find someone else. That's not, sort of within our wheelhouse, and go find someone else.
Are you speaking for up here and the police department?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
That's all I want to know. So they're getting the service they want out of it.
Did they give us any kind of estimate on the number of hours that they would provide for that extra money to do that biannual thing? I mean, is that a couple days on site with one person, or?
Yeah, let's see
Look
here.
at the proposal again.
1 hour per device.
That's a lot of money, I think.
Maybe, maybe not. Depends on how long they're going to spend here.
I'll spend 2 days with it. I had to call a guy in last night to help me get my Netflix working.
Yeah, so
So
it's
they're
40 hours for the inventory.
No, but I got it fixed.
40 hours for the inventory, and then 60 hours for the actual audit, to go around and visit each of those computers. So,
How many computers do we have roughly?
well, more than I thought, probably close to 40 to 50. Yeah. So it's not just the computer sitting at the desktop, but it's also the computer sitting behind the counter of the community center. And
You got computers in the police cars?
yeah,
Do they do those too?
I don't know those be part of this
They-
agreement or not.
They've had to learn as they go. So I will be honest with you and tell you that the tablets that we put in the cars, It took 10 to 12 months to get them where they need to be.
Are they there?
They are up and running at this point, but, and as Laura said, there are some painful spots in there. PTI is cheaper, but you have to understand that when you have somebody like that standard, you're paying $150,000, you're going to get that level of service, but that's a lot of money.
Right.
When you pay less, you may deal more over the phone, or it may take a couple of days to get them to come out.
Kind of get what you pay for, you gotta find that happy medium.
And there-
Sometimes.
And other providers were not without their frustrations as well, but I think we've certainly.
That's an example where they took a project on and they realized it was way beyond their skill level. And creating those mobile devices for the police cars, that's a very unique application. Requires a very unique interface with the network because they actually have those laptops on while they're driving around the city and communicating back to the network. And I think they thought they could do it. The more they got into it, the more they realized they were in over their head. And it just took us finally saying, just give it back to us. We'll find somebody to get it solved. And, again, they're kind of like good waiters. They want to make sure that your glass of water is always full, but sometimes they can be more of a hindrance than maybe a help. So.
Well, that was good information on what we used to pay, so I'm good with, we're still a lot way under where some of
And,
the-
and we've talked about, in-house, a lot of the cities, particularly on what we've found is we've talked to them about how are other departments managing their, mobile devices for their police departments. And what we've found is most departments have someone in-house who spends quite a bit of time and has some of that expertise. So I think we really have to sort of explore all of our options and what is the most cost-effective solution to do that.
What about getting Kurt Man a typing lesson and see if he can help?
That, I can tell you, is not an effective solution.
He's trying to be creative.
Speak text.
Well, anyone else have any other questions on this one, or any recommendations?
Take it.
Council.
Take consent?
I'm okay with consent.
Okay, great.
But then I'm almost always okay.
All right. Next up, there is an ordinance establishing an equipment reserve and replacement fund. So, Brian?
Okay, I spoke just a little bit earlier during our public hearing on the budget. What we're desiring to do here is to create an equipment reserve replacement fund as something of a savings account, if you will, for the future purchase of equipment. We'll be allocating money every year from the general fund to this equipment reserve replacement fund, and then we would do that in such a fashion that we'd be planning for the purchase in the future of equipment.
Earmarking.
It would be earmarking it. So a good example of that, about a year ago, we bought 6 new frontline police cars, total of a little bit less than $400,000. So what we like to do is basically, we know the lifespan of those vehicles is about 4 years. So it'd be about $100,000 a year that we'd be pulling out of the general fund, out of the police department's budget, and putting into this fund. So that 4 years from now, we've got the money there to buy those vehicles, as opposed to going to that lease purchase agreement like we did last time. The lease purchase have served us well because we've been able to take advantage of low interest rates, but as you heard today, interest rates are going up. So we're not always going to have that advantage. So I'd rather see us pay ourselves as opposed to paying interest rates through a lease purchase.
True.
So this is the way to do that.
So the money's earmarked, but it's still flexible, it could be
Right.
transferred for something else should you.
If you have an emergency, you can, and my goal is to sit down with department directors every year and evaluate where they're at. If the chief decides he can wait another year in the purchase of his vehicles, we'll just leave that money sitting there and we won't allocate anything for that year 5. If he wants to move it up, for whatever reason, he has an emergency purchase he needs to make now, we have flexibility to be able to move some money around to do that.
Kevin said he needs a new captain's car.
Yeah.
No.
I took a ride in his car yesterday. It's plenty fun. He's good. He doesn't need that.
I recommend we take this to council, but not consent, and I think you need to explain it just like you did,
Yeah.
that we're putting money back in our own pockets and keeping it that way so we're not expending additional interest rates. That's a great explanation.
That was very good. I concur.
Sounds good. And take this one to council on the agenda.
Me to concur.
Last update from Brian that we have is our 2017 budget amendments.
So this is the budget amendment I spoke about in our public hearing. This would be the adoption of the actual resolution to make the amendments.
Take it to council.
Further questions about this?
We want more Brian. What else you got? That's it?
I think that might be it, is it? Yeah,
That's it.
it's now Laura's turn.
All right, next up we have our 2018 budget ordinance.
So each year, as we get ready to close out the calendar year and head into our new calendar and fiscal year, we take these two actions, which are really housekeeping items, which then just formalize the budget, which was adopted back in 2018, and then gives the city administrator the authority to spend according to the budget. So the first item is the budget ordinance, which sets that. We've made no changes, so we've had no significant changes in predictions for revenues or expenditures for the 2018 budget. So as it was presented and approved in August of this year is what is being presented this evening for consideration. So that's the first budget, 2018 budget ordinance.
No question. Take it.
And then the second just directs spending according to the budget. So.
City administrator has what kind of authorization for discretionary spending?
I have authorization up to $10,000 unless it is a piece of equipment or something that is already approved in your, it's referred to currently as a 10-year equipment replacement plan, but essentially the items that you approve in the capital budget each year, if it's formally approved in that, we don't have to bring it back. We've been bringing it back because we've had some, we've made some changes or we've seen some significant savings, and we think it's important to talk about that. But those are kind of the thresholds that we have.
And what about the mayor?
Mayor does not have any specific expenditure authority.
How about Tom Garrity?
Nope.
Okay, so we do.
Yep.
We should take those to council.
Did someone recommend those?
Yeah.
Pat, are you making a recommendation?
Pat recommended?
I'd love to.
Do you want consent or not consent on those?
Yeah, on the budget ordinance,
On her authority.
on the authority one, I think that can go.
I don't know what you're
Can't
going to
go.
talk about it. I don't know why you want to talk about it, what you
I know.
want.
Nothing
Nothing
changed.
changed.
Nothing
just
changed, so
fresh.
both can be on
That's the thing,
consent.
they can go to consent.
Okay.
Okay.
Unless someone has an objection. All right, got a couple other updates here from Martha. The first one is on cereal malt beverage license renewals.
This is just the annual renewal for those businesses that sell cereal malt beverage. Their licenses renew on an annual calendar year basis. And we have 4 businesses, 5 locations that are renewing, requesting that they renew their license.
So take it council, dilly-dilly.
Stay close.
Is that code for consent?
And so the city council is we're the only level of regulation on those people who sell cereal malt beverages. The state does not get involved in that process.
They regulate drinking establishment licenses, so. And consent?
Consent, good. And then next there is a request for a massage establishment license.
Yes, we have a young woman who has applied for both massage establishment and massage therapist license. The location is at 4811 Lamar, which is down by, close to our public works, that little building right outside. James has done an inspection of the office. She submitted all her application materials. We are waiting on her background check to be complete, but because council must approve the massage establishment license. The massage therapist license can be approved administratively. We wanted to bring this forward and recommend that it be approved, but based on pending a favorable background check that Chief Hadley signs on.
How long does that take?
It goes to the KBI, so it just depends on how backed up they are. I mean, that's kind of out of our...
I was just curious.
Yeah. I don't know, Ben, do you know how long it usually takes for those?
To get back from the
Yeah,
state.
it really varies, doesn't it?
Yeah, it just depends on
Yeah,
how
A
backed
load
up they
they
are.
got at the time, probably.
right.
Is there anybody else in that building, or she by herself in there? or-
There's a few businesses down, there's a few businesses down there. There's not another massage establishment in that building, but there are a few other
There's other
businesses.
tenants in the
Uh-huh,
building.
there are other tenants, right. So,
Any recommendations?
Pending the back.
Pending the background check. All right. That does it for the action items. We do have one discussion item for the Finance and Admin Committee tonight on the police department overhiring policy. So,
Yeah, and I'll
Chief Hadley.
kick it off really quickly and then ask the chief to sort of chime in. So I know we've been very open and had several conversations over the course of the last year about some of the challenges that we've experienced in recruiting and or retaining officers in the police department. Not unique to us, it's a problem that's being experienced not only throughout the metropolitan region, but really throughout the nation. So the department has explored a variety of different ways of recruiting and sort of increasing that initial applicant pool. And the chief can elaborate on that, but I think they should be commended. They've done a great job in sort of exploring new opportunities, and we've had some success in hiring now. We are currently technically down now 4 positions because we brought one on a week ago Monday. So we had been down 5 positions for quite some time. And I think I've been out for a couple of days, but we had 4 going to the academy, but one was still questionable.
Right.
And I don't know if we've resolved that, or it may still be pending. But part of what we find is the process from the time we interview someone and select someone, and that we get them through all of the background testing and physical testing, and then if we have to send them to the academy, the process is so long before we actually get them on the street that a lot can happen. We're short on the street, but we're also then, there are lots of points along that continuum where something could happen and we might actually lose that employee and sort of be back to square one. So one of the things that we've been looking at is what else can we do? What else are other agencies doing to sort of address this shortfall or this gap that exists in hiring? And so we started discussing, and the chief brought forward this concept of overhiring. The city of Lenexa currently is allowed to overhire. So, for example, we're budgeted for 29 commissioned officers, and so what we will be talking about and looking for some direction on this evening is the ability to overhire up to 2 in our case, so up to 31 at any given time to help us try to manage that ebb and flow in our staffing levels within the department. So City of Lenexa currently has a 6 over policy. The City of Merriam has an overhire policy of 2, as does the City of Prairie Village. So oftentimes when cities are short positions, we take advantage and we realize that salary savings. The police department is a little bit unique because they're a 24/7 operation. We do have to, so a couple of things happen when we're short staffed. We'll run at minimum staffing levels on each shift, which obviously has an impact on response times potentially. It can have an impact just on kind of officer burnout and overload. And I think also officer safety is a concern when you're constantly running at minimums. The other thing though is that in the police department they're a little bit unique because we've got to pay the overtime to make sure we can even meet those minimum staffing levels. So we don't always have as much savings with vacant positions in the police department as we might anticipate in other departments. So we're sort of paying it one way or the other. And so when and we've typically had turnover, on average, I think we probably have turned over 1 to 2 officers a year throughout our history. So that's not uncommon for us, and that doesn't create really issues that we've seen in this last 12 to 18 months. When we start being 4 officers down, 5 officers down, or potentially more, that's when it really starts to become concerning. And I think that's the situation that the chief and his command staff are really looking to address in this situation. The other thing is that, so we've talked about kind of, improving the recruitment pool, which we've done. Lateral hiring, which is where we lost many of the officers that we've lost over the last 12 years, or 12 months. It was something that was difficult for us to address or really sort of get our arms around until we got all the way through the classification and compensation study. So we needed to understand where our existing employees were going to sort of fall out on that continuum in terms of salary before we felt we could very effectively go out and recruit and try to make some of those lateral hires. I think that we feel like we're in that position as well. And so I know Ben can talk more about this, but I think the intent would be at this point, if we were given the ability to overhire, that we would look at this point in time, trying to look at some of those lateral hires and bringing in certified officers so that we can get them on the streets sooner than putting someone through the academy. So the challenge with this really is, making sure that we have a level of trust and communication between the chief and myself and you all in terms of not letting this become sort of budget creep and personnel creep. And so we get at some point down the road and we say, well, we've always had 31 officers. And I think the chief will probably tell you that I've pushed him over the last several months to make sure he was giving me the consistent answer about, okay, so if we go to 31, then how do we get back to whatever that optimum level is at 29? And so I'll let him kind of address that. But I think one of the things that we would certainly commit to is providing you all with a periodic update. Whether, I don't know what the appropriate time frame, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, where we would let you know where we are in terms of that spectrum and where we are in that continuum. But our goal is to really, on average, be at 29 officers over the course of each year. So Ben, if you want to come, anything else you want to add to that?
So I have to take my hat off to Kirk. Most places have a recruitment division, like the sheriff's office in Lennox and Olathe, and I have Kirk. We always win. We have found ourselves in a spot at the start of this year that, and I told you all before, Mission's not going to pay as much as Olathe and Lennox and some of the other cities, that you can't compare those cities together. But they have some of the unique spots like tanks and helicopters and dogs, and I talk about that stuff. They also have a different tax base. So there's a reason why you want to be in Mission. So when our officers left, some for money, some for SWAT teams and stuff like that. One of them recently just resigned, and his wife wanted to move back to Connecticut. So there's no amount of money or dogs or anything that are going to stop that. So it's not all just work stuff, it's family stuff too. But Mission has been in this spot before. When I first came here, we called it the Ice Age. Everybody left and we ran the streets with 9 people, which is absolutely crazy. But when I first came here, there wasn't even sometimes a supervisor on the street. So you're guaranteed at least a supervisor and 2 officers on the street all the time. Now, where we start running into a problem is last night, call comes in from Hy-Vee, and it's suspicious activity, and as the first officer is pulling into the parking lot, and I have 3 on last night, the officer says, hey, wait, I need to talk to you. They hit the gas, go out on Metcalf. As soon as he catches up to the car, as they're trying to get northbound I-35, he turns on the lights. They didn't take the curve the way they should have, and they flipped and rolled the car. So 2 of the 3 people in there ended up at KU, and both of them had broken legs. And 2 of the 3 people had warrants in the car, that's why they were running. I have 3 people on duty last night, and I have multiple people going to the hospital in custody because they got warrants. I have a car that's flipped over close to the highway, and now I've got nobody driving your streets. And we had to ask for help from another department. So that's the minimum that we run at. And we call that being blacked out, when you don't have anybody in service. So, does it happen frequently? Sometimes. We didn't put any documents in your guys' agenda packets, because a lot of this stuff we
So did you
don't
call-
need getting out.
Did you call Kirk in last night?
No, he didn't answer his phone. What you're gonna notice is these are briefings from days, evenings, and midnights. It tells you the officers that are working, what their radio number is, their car, and the number on the far right-hand lane is gonna tell, or the far right-hand side is gonna tell you the calls for service that they actually ran.
So
We
I've got a question.
Yeah.
You're talking about these extra people. Definitely, I think everybody here understands the need, necessity for that, but that's immediate.
Right.
That you're talking about, in a short time comparatively to all time. Within a couple of years, we're gonna have 600 new people living here. We're gonna have a couple of new developments here that attract people. And I can see where we may need, instead of 3 people, now you need 4 people on a shift out there every time. So are we looking at that as well?
So tonight, it's just to give you just a quick, hey, where are we? My intent to want to hire over, and I'll tell you who I want to hire. But I wanted you guys to see what a slow shift looks like, and then a 2 or 3 page briefing, and how many, because we can run 10 or 15 calls and there's no reports. That's great. But if we take a report, it's listed on there, and some of those are warrant arrests, we got to drive out to the county jail. Accidents take an hour to work. So when we talk about hiring more people for the future, I don't want to hire all these people before stuff starts getting built. What I want to do is know exactly what's getting put in at the gateway and all these other places, come back to you and give you my opinion and tell you that, hey, if we want to add a business district and we know that these businesses and all this development's going to happen, it takes 4.5 officers to work another district. I would recommend that you go to 4 officers on at a time, but that's a conversation for now.
We'll come back to you with the chief's opinion, as well as, you know, one of the things that we've talked about that we haven't always had coming out of dispatch, because we don't do our own dispatching, is looking at, you know, we maintain information every year on our calls for service. And our calls for service, if you look back, those are...
It seems like we're getting really far off topic.
Right.
The topic here is whether or not we philosophically agree with the concept of overhiring 2 officers. So I think we need to kind of
bring that back.
Because you're opening up a real big can of...
Yes, but we'll come back with,
So,
present that in a, as we would with any other additional budgetary request,
Sure.
with the data to support
And I was
that.
just trying to see if we were looking
Yeah.
at that down the road as part of this.
I'm looking at for budget time
So
next
we're
year
kind of tight.
to bring you guys something and see what you think. And then it gives the developments time to figure out, hey, what are we doing?
Sure.
As far as this goes, those briefings show you the average number of calls that we run. Some days are really slow, some days are really busy. Here's 2 samples of schedules for you guys to look at so that you can see how hectic these things can get. So where we stand right now, we did have 5 positions that were open. We hired a person from Edwardsville who used to work here, Cliff Oblinger. Wanted to come back here and work. He started a week and a half ago. He'll be done by the end of January. So that puts me 4 people short. And as of today, I have 4 brand new people to go to the police academy. Starting January 2nd, they get a couple days in-house and then we send them to the academy. That'll get us fully staffed back up to 29. Now those people will graduate the academy the middle of May and start 3 months of field training, and then they'll be out on their own the end of August. Doesn't do us a whole lot of good now, but you're getting some people in the door. Laura's right that one of those people's having a hard time getting out of the military. So I'll know Friday at noon if that spot's going to be back open or not. We don't know if these people are going to pass the academy. And I have another person who possibly is going to start at the sheriff's office January 15th. He's been very open with us. Another one of those 5 to 7 year officers. So he needs to give us 2 weeks notice. So I imagine by New Year's on he's going to leave. Now, I'm always about hiring whoever the best person is. It used to be that you'd throw the ad out and you would get 50 people to show up and take your test, and that's not the case anymore. So we've gone out and done virtual job fairs. Kirk's been all over IT. We've been out to the military bases recruiting people. One of the people that we offered a job to came out of that. One of the positions that we offered was a dispatcher from another department that's female, because currently we don't have any females that work at the police department, except for records. I will tell you that over the last week, I've given a conditional offer to a female who is certified and a veteran from another department, so she could start on the street. Her background is going on right now. I also have 2 other females and another male that are all certified from cities in the metro that are well respected, that want to come work here. So, not knowing if somebody's going to go to the sheriff's office, what's going to happen with our other new recruit, I would like to be able to hire 2 over. That is over our budget. Now, we're also saving money right now because we were 5 people, now we're 4 people short. So we're not paying 4 people salaries right now, and we're saving that money. I want the ability for those overhires to be those people that walk through our door that you don't want to walk out. If it's that diamond in the rough that you want, somebody who's certified that I can bring in with the experience, because the people we've lost so far this year are mid-range people, 5 to 7 year people. And those are the people I want to bring in and lateral in, like Laura was talking about. Now, that would put us at 31 people. If somebody doesn't make it out of the academy, it drops us down to 30, that's okay. This city has decided that 29 officers right now is what works best. Even if we're down to 28, we're okay. When you get down to 25, 24, and I have another one that's out on FMLA time right now for 6 months, he'll be back for some light duty. That's when it starts to hurt. Now, some of the crimes that we've had lately, some of it's luck, whether you catch them or not. We always end up catching them in the end. Within, I think it was 2 hours, we had already identified the people that broke into the houses in Countryside and up in Millhaven. So, but running as short as we were, I will tell you that the entire command staff was out combing those neighborhoods. And my wife asked me, she goes, "Why are you out on the street?" That's where I need to be. So, I would appreciate it if we could hire 2 over. I know that if we do go to 31, that's not a constant, but again, I've got some of those diamonds in the rough that are wanting to come work here, and I don't want to see them walk out the door. So
I am comfortable with overhiring 2. I think we're looking at an average, is what you're trying to achieve, knowing there's going to be times you may be 1 or 2 over, there's going to be times when you're 1 or 2 under, but on average, over a period of time, you will have the number of officers you need. As long as we have the periodic check-in of where are we in the process and keeping track over time what our average is. So
sure,
I'm comfortable.
And happy to do that.
Yep.
Anytime you guys need it. So I know 29 is the optimum number to be at. And when I first came here, detectives had 1 person, and all the reports went out to the sheriff's office, and now we have 4 detectives, and there's 85 open cases right now that they're working. So, you know, we built this department, and I've seen it grow, and it's going to continue to grow. But to answer Pat's question, yeah, this next budget cycle, I'll come back to you and see what this city wants to do as far as depending on the development.
I know this isn't the appropriate time, but
Sure.
when you do come back, could you give us just an idea of what the skill mix requirement is now versus maybe 10 years ago? And how you're looking for people that are completely well-rounded, they could write grants, they could be on the street, they do a multitude of things. I'd really like some insight as to what you look for now on your skill mix level.
Sure, absolutely. Any other questions?
Good job, Chief.
Kurt does only count as 1 person, so.
Yeah, point.
There's a lot in here.
All right, yeah, thanks.
Good job, Chief.
Thank you.
Next up, I know we're running a little long here, the big agenda tonight, but Laura, if you have any other department updates?
Just a couple, and I think I'll try to squeeze them all in now, because by the time we get to the end of the next agenda, we'll all be ready to go home. I did look up the auditor's budgeted 300 hours for the performance of the audit for 2017 at a not-to-exceed cost of $27,000. And I don't know if we mentioned, but it was announced publicly today that we achieved our gold level recognition for the Communities for All Ages program. So we'll be sending out thanks to Emily for submitting that, and thanks to you all for your support of our work in that area. Just a reminder that we have our Employee Appreciation Luncheon tomorrow at 1 o'clock at Cinzetti's. Hope you can all join us for that. Also, in the FYI section of the Star today was the ad posted for the upcoming Ward 4 vacancy. We will be accepting letters of interest and resumes through the 29th of December for that process. So there's more information on our website as well. And then we thought the traffic signal was going to go live at Woodson and Johnson Drive yesterday, and they shipped the controller to the wrong location in Chicago. So it should be here late this week, right?
That's what they think.
They'll get it. Everything else is ready to go. We're waiting for the controller. So late this week.
Yeah,
But
I told them I was going to drive to Chicago and pick it up.
And I think that's all I have.
Great. If there's nothing else, then we can close our finance and admin meeting.
All right, does anybody need a break?
You know, I need a chocolate.
Oh, good call. Let me know if there's any left when you get done.
Yeah, you want one?
Yeah.
So are we ready to go ahead and open the CDC meeting? All right, sounds good. Okay, Mr. Belcher, streetlight maintenance contract, please.
Yes, the streetlight maintenance contract, we solicited an RFP for these services. As many of you know, we purchased the streetlight system back in 2013 from Kansas City Power and Light. Due to us not having the equipment or the expertise to work on that equipment, we've contracted that service out. In 2013, Black & McDonald did get that contract, and they've been the streetlight maintenance contractor since that time. We rebid this project end of November, and again, they were the lowest and most responsible bid. And looking at the numbers, you'll notice a big gap between them all. Black & McDonald's number is basically in line with what we are paying now. In talking to the other two contractors, the 284 number, he had a maintenance number, and then he also added pole replacements. His anticipated number of knockdowns were way higher than we've ever seen. His anticipated knockdown per month was like the same that we've had in the last 4 years. So that's what kind of drove that cost up.
Maybe he knows something we don't know.
Well, maybe he does. But Black & McDonald's done a great job these past 4 years, so I have zero questions moving forward with them. They actually do a lot of the maintenance work for Kansas City Power and Light. They kind of do the same type of work for KCP.
Were they doing all the work when Kansas City Power and Light owned it?
They were.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, they were doing, basically the scope of the contract that we have with them for Kansas City Power and Light. So.
Any other questions?
Just one thing, a little bit related to this. Have we done any analysis to look at replacing the lighting with LED lights?
We've actually done some LED replacements. Some of the EcoFit lights that we did along sections of Lamar, 55th Street, and Johnson Drive. All of the new lighting that we've done with projects, so Markway, Johnson Drive, and Fox Ridge, have all been changed from that high pressure sodium to LED to drive down, basically your energy usage and ultimately your costs.
I know the cost on the lights themselves has gone way down in the last couple of years too. So.
They have come down tremendously.
Yeah.
But we have these sections where we do this. A lot of the old system is direct vary power. So basically the power for the street light comes off a pole directly to the light and powers the light that way. With these projects, when we go through and take down the old lights, we put them on a controller, so we know they're all metered. We know exactly how much power they're using. The old lights we pay for them based off a formula. What type, what wattage, estimated usage, and that's how they figure the power cost for those. So as we do these projects, we want to make sure that we're
taking those off and getting them on something that's metered so we know exactly what we're using.
Just wondering at some point if it'd be worth looking into a one-time replacement, just run some numbers quick on what it might cost to replace all of our current non-LED lights and replace with LED lights, and what kind of savings we might see with that.
Absolutely.
I know they're coming way down lately.
How long would they return on investment?
Right, yeah.
No, I think
I
that was
think maintenance is a lot less on those two, or can be a lot less.
And it lasts a lot more.
I know I put some spotlights up in my house, and they're guaranteed for 10 years, and those things are brighter than the light bulbs that are replaced, and they weren't much more.
We can absolutely do that. I know one of the things we'll want to look at too is, so we issued debt to acquire the streetlight system, and it was a 10-year note, and so that note should pay off in 2023. So we've got about $80,000 a year in annual debt service on that. So obviously when that note pays off, those funds could be available, but we absolutely are doing whatever to replace them on new projects that are going in.
Sure.
The light at the block of 5600 Horton is on 24/7.
okay.
And then this light out here in front of City Hall is out. Just going around.
Pedestrian light. We had an issue with the Christmas lights and the breakers in the building today.
Gotcha. All right, anything else? Take it to council, do we want this on the consent agenda?
I think so.
All right, John's up again to discuss total wall lift.
This is going to be the mini John show. This year, when we were purchasing the capital equipment that we had budgeted for 2017, we recognized a pretty significant savings in those items we've purchased to the tune of approximately $70,000. As we've gone through the year and talking to the superintendent and crew leaders, a piece of equipment that we find ourselves renting a lot is a towable lift. We do quite a few different projects with these: tree trimming, banner hanging, light bulb changing, flags. So we've found ourselves going down and renting that lift quite a bit. For a period, we were renting that lift probably once or twice a month. Between April and August, that lift rents for about $300 a day, approximately $1,200 a week. A lot of these projects that we do are typically a week long, tree trimming in the park or going through and hanging the flags and doing those types of projects. But we believe that it would be beneficial to own one. I think that if we did, we would find a multitude of other things that we could probably do with it when we did have it. So what we're recommending is the purchase of a Bill-Jacks 3632T in the amount of $27,350. You'll notice that there was one of the Genie lifts that was approximately $500 cheaper. The boom type on it really doesn't serve the same purpose. It's an articulated boom. The one we're recommending is a straight boom. And we feel that that would better suit our needs.
Good job, right on for that.
With the rental, how many years do you think we have to pay back on this? You said 300 a day, but if you do it once, if you do it once a week, you got 1,200 a month. You got 5 months, you got $5,000. Talking about a 5-year payback.
I would venture to say that would be a safe bet. There's other things that I think that we could use it for and see savings in. When our HVAC contractor comes down and checks all of our HVAC in the shop, they actually have to rent a lift, which they pass on that cost to us. I actually asked Derek the other day, I said, if we had a lift here, would you be able to use that? And he said, yeah. He said, we're all covered for that. So that would save us about another $1,000 a year and not having to, get that passed on to us by that contractor. So I would say $5,000 a year is probably a fair amount, but I think there's other places that we can find uses for it.
What do you think the lifespan of one of these would be?
We would probably put it on a 10-year replacement with our other stuff. We found that Certain items you can stretch out a little bit longer, trailers, the shop air compressors, things like that. And if we come across something that is still in good condition and operates well, we'll, extend it out a few more years.
All right, anything else? All right, take it to council. Do we want this under consent or non-consent?
I think we should take it to the consent.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. All right, next we have Brian Scott to discuss an agreement with GBA.
Right.
I'm back. You thought you were done with me. All right, this item is an agreement with GBA for civil engineering, plan review, and inspection services related to the Gateway Development Project. This would be a total of $312,746. Back in the summer, we brought to you all the contract with FSC for plan review, building inspection services, and that was primarily for the buildings themselves. So we have gotten plans for the apartments. They have reviewed those and submitted comments back to Gateway, the development group, as well as the architectural firm working for the development group, Eldorado. The contract to GBA be more for all the site work around the project, anything that's not necessarily a building. So it would be the utilities coming into the site, it would be the street lights, the on-street parking up here, as well as on-site parking, stormwater, yeah. Anything that's not related to the physical structure itself. That's how we kind of divvied up those duties. FSC felt they were more comfortable just doing building, and the GBA had the skill set to be able to do the civil work on site and around the site. We really went ahead and considered phase one to be all of the improvements around the site. So we'd like to have the developer finish all of this. This will probably remain unfinished. It would be the access point for phase 2 and 3. So we really kind of want to have them do all of this in the initial phase. So we built the scope of work around GBA doing all of that. Oversight work for phase 1. That's phase 1 of the contract. And then in addition, the plans call for a crosswalk across Shawnee Mill Parkway that will connect the property to those properties to the south. This is state-controlled access, so this will require some permits and approvals by KDOT. That's kind of a whole separate process in itself, and GBA can coordinate that with the contractor and the city to make sure that all the necessary permits are pulled and the appropriate work is done. So in addition to the actual plan review for all those improvements, GBA will be out on site probably 2 or 3 times a week during the height of the construction to make sure that silt controls in place on the site, so we don't have dirt washing into the street or washing into the storm sewer. They make sure that when the contractor's out working the street, there's proper traffic control in place, and it meets all requirements for the state and the city.
Will we have a timeline in this development agreement for reimbursement from the owner back? A timeline of how if they're going to pay us intermittently or how they're going to give us money back?
These costs are reimbursable.
Yes.
You're right,
Yes.
in the contract.
And they have not put up the entire 312, is that correct?
That's correct.
No, they so far, the developer has given us $100,000 for plan review. We just got the bill yesterday from FSC for the initial plan review of the buildings. It was about $25,000.
Okay. I don't think it would be appropriate for the city to incur more cost than the developer has put up the deposit. So what you're trying to get to, right?
Mhm.
So if it's 312 is the proposed scope of this project, and he has not put up the 312, I don't want the city to go ahead and fund those costs looking for reimbursement from him. He needs to put up
Yeah.
That's true. However, in the development agreement that we have with GBA, we have to put some things on the line relative to what our expectation is of them completing the project. So how does that coincide with what the timeline for how the developer gives us money back?
We aren't that specific. It's not that specific in the development agreement, but I think we're in a position because.
But we weren't specific before and we didn't get paid. I'd like to make sure that there's a timeline that says, we will do this, subject to this, and we will get payment received within 30 days of this. I mean, to me,
Well,
there
we've
needs to be-
said yes, and I mean, we can go back and look and see if we can be that specific, but I mean, we won't issue, I think right now the goal is going to be keeping up with making sure they've got enough on deposit to cover the contracts that we have in place.
Okay.
And then we will not issue, the development agreement does specify that we will not issue a building permit until their taxes and all those other things are current. So there's some of those other kinds of provisions, but we can certainly go back, and I know that Councilmember Appleton and I talked about that earlier this week, so we can go back and kind of firm some of that up with
So a lot of this is going to be contingent on them submitting an application for a permit, and they have to pay the fees at the time they submit the application.
Right.
Right, but that's just one small part of what they still owe, so I
Yeah.
just need to make sure that we stay on top.
Right. There's other costs associated with that.
So have we already paid FSC then, anything?
No, we got the first bill from them yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't paid anything yet.
So FSC's bill is sitting on my desk when I came in this evening, it's $25,000.
Okay.
So the development agreement calls for $500,000 to be reimbursed. And this is $312,000 just in phase one. And I know it's a bigger part of the project, but do you really think there's enough left over there to cover phase 2 and 3 then with the remaining 190,000 there? Or are we
And some of the other
potentially
revenues that I
looking
think
at
coming in,
getting
yes.
some money there for plan review?
There may be a little bit that exceeds that, yes.
I'm not expecting too much in phase 2 and 3 with GBAs, like I was saying, most of that's going to be in phase 1. But
Have we talked with any other people that provide these services to get a rough estimate of costs? Or?
No. We had contracted with GBA in the last iteration of this project, so they were pretty familiar already with the project and what the city was kind of expecting of them. So
Just
that's
worry
what
about this could get into the
Yeah.
$700,000-800,000 range by phase 3, and the city's got to eat that cost.
You picked GBA through an RFP initially, right?
Yes.
So you had a cost per hour.
Yeah.
So there was some upfront vetting of GBA
Right.
as our engineering.
Right.
Do we have an update as to when we're going to hear the next step with the development agreement? We have plans for the next, for Tom Morty coming back in?
No, we can invite him. Would you like him to come back and give you an
Unless there's something, some
Yeah.
update, but I mean,
I know that Bruce has a call in to just kind of check the status update. Last time I talked with Tom before the Thanksgiving holiday, and he didn't have a specific, update. They were working through, they had a term sheet from the bank, and he did indicate they were still moving towards, the financing in the first quarter of 2018. And I know that we've been very actively, reviewing the plans for phase 1. So
I've been
that's
exchanging emails with Matt Valenti about the process for plan review. He's very anxious to get that going. So he's very anxious to get the comments back from FSC. He's also submitted the plans to Johnson County Wastewater. And in fact, the county's kind of asking, is this really going to happen before we start reviewing it? So I write a letter to them saying, yeah, it's going to happen. So.
and tenant selection will be incumbent on when he decides to tell us what the next.
when he's got that finalized.
Sounds like he's working on it.
Anything else?
It's council.
Not
No, just said.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there,
Okay, so we'll look for quotes. So November 20th, we had a special meeting in which we considered basically the replacement of a section of sidewalk along 53rd Street on the south side, basically from Woodson to about 90 to 100 feet east of Outlook. The removal and replacement of that entire sidewalk section would have triggered ADA requirements through there. That existing sidewalk does not meet the minimum width standards. In addition, there were some ramp and curb cut and other issues that needed to be addressed. So at the time we looked at, the issues there are primarily settlement related. And so we looked at a firm that could come out and potentially grind down those surfaces to eliminate trip hazards. We also contacted a firm who did a polyjacking process, and we were not able prior to that meeting on the 20th to get that firm to respond back to us, come out and give us a quote. We did reach out to several concrete contractors, and we were only able to secure a bid through one, McEnany Construction, and you'll recall, I think that bid was $30,000 and some change. And so the council did not move forward with that bid. Following that meeting, the mayor did provide me with some information about mudjacking that section, and that quote for the traditional mudjacking was included in your packet. But as we started talking about mudjacking, so one other thing we talked about on the 20th was the fact that we were in process with Stantec to do a sidewalk inventory as a part of our overall street inventory. And I think, Mr. Quinn, you asked the question about whether we'd have results back for our December meeting or not. And I think my response is we may, but we won't have a lot of time to sift through them. And so that holds true. We did get them back last week. We did take a quick look at the results through that survey process. We're still trying to make sure we understand all of that. This section of sidewalk, so they ranked our sidewalks in one of three conditions: good, fair, or poor condition. We did look at the sidewalks that were ranked in poor condition. This section of sidewalk ranked in fair condition, and in trying to look at whether or not it made sense to consider the mudjacking opportunity there. So in terms of where does it fall in that inventory process, there are other sections in that inventory which will rate in a worse condition. They are not candidates for a polyjacking process. The other thing that, as we started talking about polyjacking or mudjacking, was, is that a tool as we build a sidewalk maintenance and repair program going forward? Is that a tool that other cities are using or that we want to consider using on a go-forward basis to potentially prolong the life of some of our sidewalks? And so John reached out to several other departments, and we did a kind of a quick matrix or table for you that was included in your packet. So in looking we contacted the cities of Olathe, Overland Park, Fairway, Prairie Village, Merriam, Shawnee, Roland Park, and Lenexa. And if you had a chance to look at that, Olathe and Overland Park are both using polyjacking as a technique in their sidewalk repair programs. In fact, Olathe actually has an in-house crew and the equipment to do that themselves. Most of the other cities were not, and if you read through kind of their comments, they're either using grinding or they find it to be more cost-effective to go out and actually replace the entire panels, or they have the crews to kind of do that. So there are some cities who are using this technique as a part of their sidewalk maintenance programs. Again, I think it comes down to the question of, is this something that we want to evaluate, and does it make sense to do it on this section of sidewalk? I think at least what I think I heard was a general agreement on the council that there were significant settlement issues, and this was an area of sidewalk that absolutely we wanted to look at addressing. Just a question of how and in what time frame. We did, the other thing I included was we were able to contact a couple of other mudjacking and polyjacking firms to secure some quotes, so we had more than one to look at. So the polyjacking process is a foam injection process. It's been around for 30 plus years, but really kind of starting to see it used in this application. It is more expensive than the traditional mudjacking, but it is anticipated to have a longer lifespan and be more effective. So in looking at the Superior mudjacking quote for $2,200, again, that accounts for about 180 feet of sidewalk. It's a little bit difficult to get the actual apples to apples comparison, but if you look at affordable mudjacking, they actually perform both the traditional mudjacking and the polyjacking, and that's what's indicated on this front page. You can see $1,000 for the traditional mudjacking and about $2,300. The one thing I will tell you is they were only looking at the block Woodson to Outlook, so we contacted them and asked them to revise their bid to extend it that additional 90 feet, and we did not ever receive that back. We hadn't, as of today, received that back from them, but if we look at basically just extending those unit prices and that length and doubling this, you can kind of get into a ballpark that we think would be comfortable. So you'd probably be looking at $2,000 for traditional mudjacking and about $4,600 for the polyjacking. And then we did have another firm who came out yesterday who provides the polyjacking services. That's also included in your packet, which is the Pro Foundation Technology. They recommended that we not do this section. I think we're all familiar with the section. There's one of the properties closer to Woodson has a split rail fence along it. Their feeling was that that portion of the sidewalk was too far gone to really be a successful candidate for the polyjacking process. So I wasn't able to be on site yesterday, but it's my understanding that they recommended that section is not included in their bid. So they picked up basically from the drive there going to Outlook and then extending east of the Outlook intersection. So I'd be happy to try to answer any other questions that we have. Again, the polyjacking technique can be performed really at any time of year. It's not as weather dependent as concrete replacement and that sort of thing.
If there are sections that have come back in the Stantec study that are worse off than this, why are we focusing on this one first would be my question.
They may not be able to mudjack.
Right, I'm just saying, we're preparing it in general, right? If there are sections that are in worse shape and we're looking at putting together a plan to remedy our sidewalks as a comprehensive plan, why would we focus on just this section first? I think it'd be really helpful to see the results of that study before we move forward with anything, in my opinion.
Because I think several things play into this when you factor in the sidewalks. Accessibility, usability. I mean, a sidewalk may be in horrible shape, but if one person every 10 years goes by it, this one's accessible to a park. That makes sense. But that inventory would be really helpful in acknowledging exactly what comprehensively needs to be done with all of our sidewalks. And that way we have a level playing field with, okay, we'll pay you X amount for this, we'll pay you X plus this for this, and that. I mean, economies of scale kind of play into this too. Right. So when will we have the information back on this Stantec?
I mean, I think in January we can be to a point where we've been able to really sort of unpack it, and you know, we took the file, we have to get it on a map, we have to really make sure we understand. We've gone out to do some on-site, you know, eyes on. I mean, I can tell you on the red sections there were only about 5 throughout town. I did drive and look at those sections in preparing this agenda item, and because of either the damage or the deterioration, they aren't the candidate for the polyjacking or the mudjacking. So kind of in my mind, the question maybe for this specific agenda item is this a technique that we want to try? And this technique wouldn't make sense on those red sections. That doesn't mean it wouldn't make sense on some of the other yellow sections. But is it something that we want to see how that we want to test basically to know if it's something that we want to use?
Like a pilot project.
Like a pilot project to use it going
because
forward.
it's so much less expensive than replacing the whole sidewalk if you can save it.
What about that piece of it though, they said that this wouldn't be a candidate for? So we're only addressing 80% of this bad section of sidewalk.
Well, it's one company.
Okay, through that one company's bid. Maybe we need to wait for some other bids to come back from someone else who's got a... I wouldn't want to address 80% of one block. It doesn't really solve the problem then, in my mind.
Because where that picket fence is really where I feel is the worst. section of the sidewalk.
So what kind of recommendation would be made with the sidewalk that's completely failing?
You're gonna have to just
Replace.
remove and replace
Yeah,
it.
replace it.
You'll tear it out and replace it in its entirety. And then when you do that, well, if you're doing that with the individual panels, you're the thing that triggers the ADA requirements is really much larger. If you're doing, 100-foot sections or so, the intent of the ADA is that if you're overhauling that much sidewalk, you should come back in and do it. If you're taking a panel out here or there, you're not necessarily going to trigger the ADA requirements.
John, have you seen this used on sidewalks anywhere, or do you even have a feeling of how it might be effective, or?
I've been around it in places in the past. My father-in-law had to have his steps coming up to his front stoop.
I did too, and it was not a good deal. I've had it done twice, and they...
Was it a poly jack or was it mud
No, it's
jack?
mud jack, okay.
Because I've heard that mud jacking is complete.
I mean, I think mud jacking is kind of the older technology, as Laura kind of alluded to, the Pro Foundation guy kind of explained. He said, the poly's been around for 30 plus years, but the equipment was never really available to use it in this type of an application. That we kind of became available in the early 2000s, so that's when they started using the poly. Your traditional kind of breaks down over time. It's kind of a concrete slurry, so you kind of get that, you lift it up, it'll last a little while, and then it starts to settle back.
Yeah.
The polyurethane is basically a plastic, so it won't break down like
Or water resistant, I'm guessing then.
Yeah.
And I'm very pro pilot project to try something, but how long would it be before we knew if it was sufficient or not? 5 years before we would try it? I mean, I don't know if that pilot project really works on this particular item.
Well, and I understand what you're saying, but I think wherever we try a pilot project, you're going to have that same time consideration. So I think we would have to go back and say, we can look at some of the other, there's, Olathe, Overland Park, where they've been doing it, we would have the opportunity to maybe go out and identify those as well and see how those have kind of held up, assuming they have some.
Is there some way, if we're going to look to level out a section of this sidewalk, and there's that 20% of it, or however much it is that can't be fixed with this technique, can we get some kind of a bid that would say, for this whole section, here's what our cost would be? I just don't know why we would fix just a section of that whole bad section versus trying to at least take another part. This might be a candidate where we can replace a whole block or whatever.
I got the impression though that the poly jacking won't work for that.
Well, that's what I mean, but something else will, right? So is there some method for that part that's too far gone, fixing that and poly jack the rest, some hybrid thing there that we could get an estimate on even, or? And maybe it's not worth.
I don't know that you want to put those two techniques. I don't think you want to take it out and replace it up against a section that you're poly jacking, because ultimately, you're going to have to come back at some point and remove and replace that section that you poly jacked. So you probably want to, look at that poly jacking.
Well, how much would it cost to do the whole thing like it needs to be done?
Without
poly jacking?
$30,000.
But I think the other issue is, why are we picking this? We've got a survey coming out. We haven't even looked at the survey. I think we need to look at the survey, we need to study these things. Why are we in a hurry? This has been like this. Jason said it's been like this for years. So all of a sudden we're trying to push it through. We've all got our own pet projects. Everybody's got a cracked sidewalk someplace. I just think we need to stop and step back and get our survey, and I think you need to look at it logically. I just think you need to take it step by step and look at the different processes and figure out the fair, the good, and the poor. I think that's the issue. I don't think we should be looking at fixing the sidewalk.
Well, if it was me, I could care less.
Any other discussion?
I think it's cheap to fix it, to try to fix it, because it's right across the street from you. There's a lot of kids walking up and down that street.
They've been
But
walking.
But 20% of that section is still dangerous and bad for those kids walking up and down that street if we spend this money. Right, so we're going to fix it, let's fix the whole thing and come up with what it's going to take to fix the whole thing. Otherwise, I feel like it's kind of a waste of money to just fix that section of the bad section.
Well, and if we've got a survey, why don't we wait and find out? We'll get a better price if we can do more than one stop and more than one place.
That, or, and, I mean, to be honest, like I mentioned before, if we've got sections that are worse off, I think we need to evaluate that too and prioritize what really should be done first. And until we have those results, I don't feel comfortable moving forward. That's just me.
We have those results, we're just not showing you.
Fair.
Like Laura said, we got them back about a week and a half
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
And we'll, I mean, it'll take us some time to unpack it.
Yeah.
And get it on a map that really makes sense.
Well, I think that's the smart thing to do is look at the whole situation. And if we decide, oh yeah, that's one of the 4 areas that we definitely want to hit, then it gets done when we do that. Sure. Yeah, I don't see a reason.
So it doesn't sound like we want to go ahead and take this to council then?
Let's go.
I'm asking.
I'm saying let's go.
All right.
That's just me.
Okay, then we've got Christy talking about some fun stuff finally.
Lights and streetlights aren't fun?
Budget amendments.
Someday.
Anyway, yes.
We'll take it out sometime and play around.
What I'm bringing forward tonight is the addition of the second slide of the Mission Family Aquatic Center. If you will remember back when we went through the planning process for building the aquatic center and everything, that the consultant that worked on that project with us said that, you know, every 3 to 5 years you probably need to try to add a new feature to keep it exciting and refreshed and you know, somewhere where people want to keep coming, where they don't get bored. We actually had budgeted in the 10-year equipment replacement plan to have this done actually last year, and we weren't going to be able to get it done in time to get it pushed through and installed before the season started, so we went ahead and we pushed it into this year. So it's been out there on the CIP, or the 10-year equipment replacement, for I think ever since the aquatic center was originally constructed. We went ahead and we added it on there. So knowing now how much time it took to manufacture it, get it in and everything, then we've started to work ahead of time so that we can get that installed in the spring, and it'll be ready to go by the time the aquatic center opens for use this year. One reason why I think this would be a really good addition for this year, and what I think it will really benefit is that the Merriam pool is not going to be open this year. So they'll be closed completely for the entire season while they do the construction of their new facility. And so we're going to have all of those Merriam people kind of looking for what they want to be their home pool. And I feel like by adding this feature and making it a new, neat, bright, exciting thing at our pool, that will attract a lot of those Merriam residents to our facility. Definitely for this year, we'll help with that.
Yeah, sounds good. We've budgeted for it.
It was budgeted when the facility was built. They put the footings in for it. The slide tower is built for it. The pump is sitting in the pump room for it. We'll just need to do, Westport will have to come back and do a little bit of additional tying it in and getting it operational, because the slide, this part of it is just to manufacture and install the slide. And then Westport will have to come in and get everything hooked up so we can actually operate.
What's the history of the safety of this? I mean, anybody getting flipped out from Twitter bombs?
This one is actually, the one that's going in is actually what we call an enclosed flume slide. So it's a tube that they'll come down through, though we have an open flume slide currently. And very, very good safety rating. As you know,
You got one indoors, don't you?
and we have one indoor also. And you know, the Kansas legislature this past year passed a new law that requires the slides have to be inspected now. So we actually had to jump through a whole bunch of hoops. This summer They gave us about a week's notice that we needed to have it done by a certain date. Originally, they were going to give us 6 months' notice or whatever, but anyway. So we have been through the process of having this slide inspected by a certified inspector that actually had to come up from Texas. There are certifying other inspectors here in the Kansas City metro area, so hopefully that'll make that easier to do in the future. But we meet all of the required safety guidelines.
And the people we buy it from give us an indemnity clause on that as well.
Yeah, we've been,
Brian?
that's what Brian and I have been sending back and forth between the attorneys and the insurance people.
The installation.
Yeah. So we've done a lot of red to cross T's and dot I's, but we finally have gotten an acceptable agreement.
Where is it in comparison with the other one?
You know, so we'll use the same tower and everything, so you'll go up, and when you get to the top of the tower,
You have to choose one.
you can choose to either go straight forward and down the existing one, or you can turn this way and come down, and it'll wind around the other side, and we'll do a deck run out also, and it will run out just in between the current deck run out we have and the bathhouse.
So people aren't going to be running into each other going down.
No. Now that's what we'll do.
How fun do you want to make this?
Yeah. Maybe we can
You
do
got a
that.
weight limit, so no 400 pound people are just stuck in there.
Yeah, there's a weight limit.
How many times does a certified inspector have to go down the slide before they can sign on it?
Just once.
So they do actually have to go down it once?
Yeah, now that's the certified inspector for the new state law that they have. Now, Splashtacular, they have their own installers that will go down it over and over and over, so like each one of those ribs that are connected together with all of those nuts and bolts, they want to make sure they have a smooth surface there, so they'll continually go over that until they feel like
I feel like a job installing slides. It's a variety of much time.
What's the warranty on this slide?
warranty. I'll have to do some research on that, Debbie, and get back to you.
Is Marion a part of the SuperPass program?
Yes, they are.
So the people that normally, you would think, the people that normally buy Marion pool passes, you think they're going, they still have a choice of all the pools.
What Merriam has proposed, and they actually took it to their council just last week, was that they will go ahead and sell their super pool passes. So Merriam residents can still buy a super pool pass in the city of Merriam. Then Merriam will take the 50% like they always do, and we will keep track of who is coming to our pools. And instead of...
So Marion's going to sell a pass and keep 50% for a facility they don't have?
Well, they're going to hold into it, and then they're going to pay out in addition to whatever else they owe to each of the cities.
So they won't end up keeping any.
They will not keep any money at all.
They're going to divvy up
As
50%.
a matter of fact, their recreation director sent me an email earlier in the week. We're running some numbers based on this year's attendance at our facility. If we would get the same attendance from Merriam next year, that would be an additional approximately $30,000 that we would get from Merriam.
Good.
And is Rover Park closed down?
The dome part of it is closed down, but yeah, but the outdoor will be open during the summer.
And then they'll all migrate back to Marion in 2019.
Do we have a plan then? You said you need to refresh every 3 to 5 years. Then do you have a longer term plan then?
What's the next feature?
What would be the next features? You can always change out like the play feature in the leisure pool area, or change out the features that are inside
The water
the...
dropper thing?
Yeah.
And who knows what will be popular. At the time we designed the pool, they have sort of like rock climbing walls that you can install on the side of the lap pool. So who knows what will be popular then, but there are those kinds of things that we can look at to add as well.
We have concept of where we want to go with this.
Yes.
Do you do any kind of survey at the end of the season, like what people might want to see in the future, or is you know, it's your expertise in the field that determines kind of like,
But yeah, it's definitely my expertise.
well, I assumed that was the case.
No, I'm sorry, we did not survey the people knowing that the slide was on the agenda to go in. It was already in the plan.
Okay.
But definitely as we move forward and we're looking at those other options, we will put those out there and say, what is it that you're looking forward to?
All right, cool.
Which would you be most interested in?
All right, thank you. Any other? All right. I'm assuming we want to take this to council and be non-consent.
You want to mention?
Yeah, you bet. All right, and then Laura went ahead and discussed any department updates already.
One other one I forgot.
All righty.
We've been working, as you know, with the Rolling Court Towns Association on kind of getting them temporary access to their parking lot. Their board authorized them to spend up to, I think, $10,000 or so to hire a contractor, which they have done. Started working on Monday. Have you had a chance to go by?
There's some Jersey barriers and some rocks back there.
Okay. So we're working.
They've been working on it.
They've been working on it, trying to get their residents access back to their garages before we get into the winter season. So we'll need to continue to follow up with their contractor and make sure it's a situation that is stable for everybody.
Wastewater is all done.
Wastewater's all done.
So that drain is gone then, that's going out to the street? That pump?
The bypass pump, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, it's been done for, I think it came out the week before Thanksgiving.
And they all feel comfortable with the work it's done.
The wastewater work?
The wastewater work?
No, I mean, the residents.
I don't know, we haven't asked them because it just started this week. I don't know. Are you hearing from some of them?
No, but
okay.
I just don't want to either.
Well,
Okay, and don't forget, next Wednesday, if anybody wants to wrap packages and deliver gifts, Wednesday at the community center, or you can help us Tuesday night at 7 o'clock and distribute. You got money for me?
Just real quick too, have we had any updates on the Friends of the Dog Park group? I know that initially we wanted a recommendation back in March, and I haven't heard anything more about it since August, September, whenever it was that we last talked about it.
Yeah, we probably need to put, I only have 5 or 6 people that want to
I've got
serve on
another one I
it.
have to forward to you.
And so I need to put that out in the magazine and get it going again, but we're looking to fire that group up in January and really kick off and get going on things.
Thanks.
All right, anything else? Then that concludes the CDC meeting. Thank you.